Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have 2,000 points of Tyranids Hydra, or Hive Fleet Hydra, and the Crimson Fist. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
And if you like the video if you want to like it, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share it, and subscribe for more. Alright, so for today I am bringing the Crimson Fists, because I lost the draw. And so I have like 1990 some points of Crimson Fists. I have heavy support for my Ark of Omen compulsory. And so basically, the shtick of this army is exploding sixes and stuff. And so, because I basically went with bolt weapons that I am familiar with, but they're pretty expensive and stuff, and because of all the meta changes and things like that, I kind of wanted to focus more on buffs. So starting with my characters, of course I have Pedro Cantor. Okay, Pedro. He's relatively strong as a chapter master. He has 6 wounds, 5 attacks, 2 up armor save, 4 up invuln save. But his buffs, he has chapter master, aura, but he gives +1 attacks to every core within 6 inches of him. That's pretty good. Then I have a Primaris Lieutenant, who I had to find the exact, something close. He doesn't have a jump pack. He has a mastercrafted power sword and storm shield, so he's tougher. And he has a reroll of 1 to wound. So I was like, okay, I'll give that to him, because I really need things to work out well. Then I have my Primaris Tech Marine. I could not find I only found the cool Crimson Fist models in the pack were not Primaris, so I was like, okay, I'll go with them. They're Primaris in rules, so that's all that matters. This guy's basically Master of the Forge. He can heal 3 wounds of a vehicle and can awaken them, so he's buffing my vehicles and stuff and healing them. And then I have, of course, my Primaris Apothecary, who has Selfless Healer and stuff. So he's going to be bringing back up my Devastators, my Devastator Centurions and stuff like that, healing, wounds, all that stuff. Then for these are not scouts. For my troops, I have 2 units of Infiltrators. Like I said, I preferred the cool Crimson Fist model, so I ignored the Primaris ones. It doesn't make much of a difference. The base is the same size. And so, yeah, 2 units of 5 Infiltrators to keep any backline infiltrating, as well as their Helix Gauntlet, making them tough lines, or I can have them infiltrate. Then I have 2 units of Terminators. Now, they're pretty much the same. They have bolters, or storm bolters, and their heavy weapon is a cyclone missile launcher. Yeah, fine, all that goody. Sergeant is power sword and stuff. Now here's the thing though. 1 unit has 7 and 1 unit has 8. The unit of 7, both of these guys are going to go into Land Raiders, but the unit of 7 will be accompanying Pedro. The other one will just be like a full squad in there. So originally I wanted 2 big blocks of Terminators, but I wanted to focus on buffs because I feel like applying some buffs may do better. And then, of course, heavy support. So we have a full unit of Centurion Devastators. Now, there is one change. The Sergeant has a Grav Cannon. Everyone else has heavy bolters and hurricane bolters. But the Grav Cannon on here, I've given him Mastercrafted Weapon as a relic. And so his Grav Cannon will be doing 1 extra damage. So he will be doing 2 to 3 damage. So I just thought it'd be something cool to try. And then, of course, 2 Land Raider Crusaders, because bolt weapons. And so we'll see how that goes. And that is 2,000 points of Crimson Fists.
Hey guys, so my army is Hive Fleet Hydra. Because I haven't really had a chance to really play any Horde-esque armies, or maybe old school Horde armies. So finally getting a chance to play the Tyranids, I was like, Horde. I was like, that's the way to go. And so I was looking through the different Hive fleets, and a lot of them really support a bunch of different things, but not really Hordes, until I got to Hydra. And basically the thing is, if I have more models than who they're fighting, then I get +1 to hit, and then there's a stratagem for rerolling wound rolls. So I was like, aha! And so my required unit type is troops, because as you can see, there's a lot of them. And so I really wanted to try the Horde thing, but I realized that their Horde units don't really do a lot of damage I mean, maybe they will just from numbers. I'm not sure yet. So I mixed in some really big monsters for like that classic like bunch of hordes, and then some individual big boys. And so starting off with my only HQ and my only synapse creature, I realized afterwards, it's kind of weird, but anyway, is my Hive Tyrant. Now, he has obviously Smite, but he has Onslaught, and Paroxysm. Onslaught is a blessing, basically taking away penalty rolls for firing assault weapons in a turn they advanced, or heavy weapons in a turn that they moved. And then the unit that he puts on is able to declare a charge even if they have advanced. And the other one basically says that they can't fire Overwatch, and -1 to wound. So one's a blessing, one's a malediction, or I curse them. But so anyway, so he has a bunch of the usual stuff, but I gave him the Warlord trait from Hydra, High Fleet Hydra, which is at the beginning of the command phase, he regains D3 lost wounds. And I also gave him a relic. So I gave him the Heavy Venom Cannon. And then going through the relics, because they have a weird amount of relics, it looks like. I found Shard Gullet, which takes the place of a Heavy Venom Cannon. It's Assault 3, Strength 12, AP 5, and 5 damage flat. I was very excited about that. So basically, I don't have any like melee like boss creatures, except I think maybe one. They're all kind of more ranged, so that way you have the hordes doing the melee, and then from the back you have like the bombardment thing. It was the idea. So anyway, so the Hive Tyrant has the relic Shard Gullet, which is just mean, but we'll see what actually happens with that. Moving on and into troops, I have 3 identical squads of 30 Hormigans. And they also have Toxin Sacks, so they automatically wound on hit rolls of 6. So I'm hoping that'll help kind of circumvent the fact that they're Strength 3 and Toughness 3, and have almost no save. So we will see. But anyway, so yeah, so 3 squads identical of 30, and then 3 identical squads of 10 Gargoyles. Now these guys, this is the minimum squad size for Gargoyles, which is 10. And they're really just more for objectives and stuff like that. They're not really intentionally going to be doing much, as far as combat goes. And that is my troops. So moving into the elite choices. Yes, these are elites. I have a Death Leaper, which is like a pumped up lictor. Now he doesn't have anything unusual. He just has the base stuff. You can't really do anything to lictors or Death Leapers in this case. So he just has a bunch of attacks, and he can pop out of the woodworks like a ninja and kill stuff. That's his thing. And then I have 2 Pyrovores, because I had like 80 points left, and I was like, well, what do you do with that? And apparently it's 2 Pyrovores. And they're basically just walking flamers. It's basically what they are. And that's basically it. So those are my elite choices. Fast attack, I have a Trigon, which is this big boy over here. And so he has the regular stuff. And I didn't, it looks like I gave him Toxin Sacks. So he, in melee, unmodified wound rolls of 6. Hit roll, sorry. Auto wound. But other than that, he's just a normal Trigon. He doesn't have anything special. I saw the 12 attacks and his gun thing, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. Let's see what he does. And so that's it for my fast attacks. I believe he also just pops up out of the woodworks and then just like it's like yeah, and kills stuff, I think. And then moving into the heavy support, so these are the big gun boys. So I'll start off with the Exocrine, and the Exocrine just has a damage 3 heavy D3 plus 6 shot gun. So it's got 36-inch range, strength 8, AP minus 4. So he's just gonna waddle around and just boop, boop, hopefully. I really hope so. And then my Tyrannofex. Now, I don't know necessarily how good he's gonna do. He's only got 4 attacks melee-wise. However, he has a Flesh Borer Hive that is Assault 30. So I saw that and I was like, you just don't find that. I have to try that. And so I don't know if it's gonna do anything. And then he has another gun that's Assault 8. So I was just like, he just shoots a lot. and so I don't know if it's going to be any good, but those are my 2 heavy supports, so hopefully they will be able to shoot stuff, shoot enough stuff that, you know, I don't get destroyed. So anyway, so that's 2,000 points on the nose, High Fleet Hydra.
Alright, so today we're playing Tide of Conviction, which is a Control 2, Control 3, Control More. The interesting modifier is that if we do not control our home objective, we have to roll a dice, and on a 1, 2, 3, you do not receive your CP for the turn. Apart from that, the secondary objective is, so cutting the board down in half this way. There's these 2 objectives here are one person's territory, these 2 objectives here are on the other person's territory. At the end of your turn, you get 2 victory points if you control one of your opponent's objectives in their territory, their half of the board. At the end of the game, you score 3 victory points for each objective you control that is in their territory, so up to 9 at the very end. And that is the mission, which is also incredibly well themed by chance. This perfect Tyranid mission. And that is the... Yeah, and that's the mission. Alright, so for secondaries, for Crimson Fists, they still are the Imperial Fists in some ways, so Bolter Barricade, which is basically, it takes a whole turn for it to happen, I believe, but I do it if basically it's an action completed on an objective. If I do it, I gain 1 point if it's in my deployment zone, 4 points if it's not in my deployment zone, and all of my units that are within 6 inches of the objective gain light and heavy cover. Then I have Grind Them Down. I just think it's possible to do. And unfortunately, Shock Tactics. It kind of goes with the mission, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually do it. So like I was able to pick 2, but the third one, this is like, I don't think I'll be able to do it, but this is the most likely. So those are my secondaries.
Yes, so mine are kind of in the same boat. I don't know if I'll be able to pull them off, but they're the most likely. Engage on all fronts, I think, should be easy enough for me. So that was an easy one. But I was trying to take all Tyranid ones, but that was not possible. So what I did take, Synaptic Insight, is for every model I kill, I gain a Synaptic kill point, but the floor is 3 wounds. So that's his Terminators, his Devastators, his characters, and his vehicles. And so if I end the battle round with 5 or more kill points, I gain 3 victory points. Now I can only gain a maximum of 12, but I don't know if I'll actually get there. And then if they have 6 to 9 wounds, I'll gain 2 kill points, or 10 plus is 3 kill points. So, and then my other Tyranid specific one is Spore Nodes, which basically, if I'm within 6 inches of his deployment zone, I can do this, one troops unit from my army can perform this action, and I basically place a marker, and so I can't do it within 6 inches of other markers of mine, so it doesn't need to be on an objective or anything, but for each one I place, it's 4 points, and I believe this is... at the end of my turn. Okay, so, yeah. So anyway, so that one will probably be a little easier, but still not like... well, hopefully I'll be able to do it. I don't know. The secondaries are really up in the air, I think, this game. So, yeah. Alright,
So for deployment, Crimson Fists had to deploy first as defenders. So then after that, the infiltrators, Green Squad, went up and took a front objective in the center. And my overall idea was positioning myself. I think how this battle is going to go is I'm going to be in the center, and I'm going to push out from there. So all my real fortification, movement of troops was in the center. I was fine with placing my Devastators in a line. He has very limited shooting, and I have an Apothecary right there, so I think it'll be fine if they're a little exposed. Vehicles take positions to be able to move forward. Hedgerow is on the left. The massive troops is on the right. And yeah, and that's overall my deployment. I couldn't really counter him because he has so many different units and such huge numbers. I was mostly focusing on playing my game and trying to take the board and being relatively claustrophobic, occupying very small space and fighting out from that. So that's my idea of deployment.
Yes, so I, for deployment, really was trying to protect my units from getting shot up. They're kind of speedy, I think. Oh, they're actually really speedy. So I was like, okay, well, they need to be able to ride out first turn and then just run forward and hopefully eat stuff. So I was basically trying to keep them as protected as possible. However, when you have massive squads, that gets harder and harder to do, as I have found. And so basically, I wasn't trying to counter anything just because I have so many units. I was just trying to keep them protected. And then the shooties in enough range and a sphere of place that they could angle out and hit stuff without exposing themselves too far. And that was kind of my idea. Well, I think... what do I think? I think I would rather go second. Being a more... I say more melee-centric army. That's not even entirely true, because it's just my troops. Not even all my troops. Everything else is really shooty. But I think going second would be better for me, because it would allow me to not get shot on a first turn. And you would have moved at least somewhat, so they would be able to move forward and hopefully do something, at the very least shoot, I don't know, anything else really. Going first, I don't know what I would actually do. I don't know if I would actually do almost anything if I went first, just because I don't want to throw myself out of position, because my troops are really, really fragile. And I want at least one full number squad to get into combat, because I just want to roll all those dice. So yeah, so I think going second would be better, and then going first would be more problematic, so I'd have to play it a lot safer, just to try and keep my numbers from being just mutilated.
Yeah. If I go first, I will basically take forward positions. I'll do great for objectives early on to have no real trouble. I'll get a lot of points at first, but I won't really be able to kill anything. I'll be able to do some light damage range-wise. Maybe. Unlikely. But if I get first turn, moving up, taking proper positions, fortifying myself, doing secondary objectives, all that stuff. If I go second, I'm doing the exact same thing, but shooting a lot of you to death. And so... yeah, because there's no way you're getting to me first turn with what you have. Yeah, so your play is to just throw everything forward. Yeah, your best strategy is to throw everything forward and just tank as much as you can, and then hope you get to my line before I can do anything.
Something lives.
Yeah, and so naturally, my best play is to go second to do as much damage as possible. If I go first, you might be able to get in some combat, but if you go second, you probably will be able to get in combat. No. Yeah.
Depends on how far you move.
If you go first, I'll get 2 rounds of shooting, probably. If I go first, you'll get 1 round of shooting from me, maybe. So, yeah, I think. I don't know. It's hard to think right now. All right, so that's what I'm thinking. I would prefer to go second, yeah. So everyone wants to go second, so... Alright.
Let's see who actually gets to. It's me. Oh my gosh.
Tie.
Oh, mine rolled off. Piece of garbage.
5. Rolled up? We have no rule on that. It
was a 1. You go first.
Yeah. We have no rule about that. Alright, whatever. Right.
Well, it didn't fly off the table.
Debatable, whatever you count as the table. Alright, whatever. Alright, so Crimson Fists, turn 1. Alright, so for command phase first, the Primaris Tech Marine awakened the Machine Spirit of the Land Raider Crusader on the right, green one. Apart from that, then my infiltrators moved far away from his pyrovores, because they have a 12-inch, 18-inch range, 5-inch movement, so they probably will get wiped out. So they moved here, and they're going to start doing the Dorn objective on there. The infiltrators in the back are doing the Imperial Fist objective in the back. My Land Raider moved up to get touching the middle section cover thingy, which will help a little bit in the future turn. The Centurions moved exactly 5 inches up, but hit boxes are weird, so with buildings, so they are at 5 inches, or they'd be just like leaning on it a little bit, still being there. Building a conga line around. The lieutenant and apothecary moved up behind them, granting buffs, AoE and stuff. Well, healing buffs. None of the Primaris lieutenant ain't helping the Centurions. And then the red land raider moved up, trying to get line of sight to the Tyrannofex. It actually does, because it's now touching the building in the end, and that was my movement phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, so Pedro's land raider fires at the Tyrannofex with his hurricane bolters, did 1 wound, he saved on a 2-up, then fired his multi-melta, both hit, both wounded. He did not have a save because it's AP -5 because of Devastator Doctrine. After that, I rolled a 2 and a 3. I spent 1 CP to reroll the damage, and I got a 6, so 9 damage to the Tyrannofex. And then his whatchamacallit, twin linked assault cannon fired and did like 4 wounds, and that 4 wounds did 2 more wounds went through because it's AP -2 because Devastator Doctrine. Then his Hunter Killer missile fired and missed. Then on the right, the Green Land Raider Crusader fired at his exocrine in the back with his Hunter Killer missile, and he hit and he wounded. My opponent failed it. He needed a 5-up, and I rolled a 6 for wounds. So that was a very devastating first turn salvo. I did not expect that. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, that's it for my first turn. Not a single secondary done, but these take time, and it's really offensive. I don't know if I'm going to do well. So I had a great round of shooting, a great first turn strike. I got 3 bolster barricades coming up. That's 9 points potentially. We'll see what happens. So far, that was a great, phenomenal start damage-wise. But we'll see what happens.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, well, command phase and movement. So command phase, the Hive Tyrant gave the green squad of Hormigans reroll hit rolls of 1 because, well, they were going to run. And then I also spent 1 CP on, so that was Bounding Advance, that was, or not Bounding Advance, that was the Hive Tyrant. The Tyrannofex, I used 1 command point to do rapid regeneration, regenning him D3 loss, D3 wounds. He gained 2 back, so he's still in a handicapped spot, but it's not as bad as it was. Well, it was still in the same spot, but anyway, not important. So then my gargoyles ran because they have flesh borers, which are assault guns. Not that they're going to do much anyway, but. So the flesh borers, or the gargoyles ran. The red hormigans did not run because they're about 8 inches from his land raider. So they might be able to make that charge as is, because you can only use 1 stratagem at a time. My exocrine just kind of tucked around just a little bit so he could see the land raider. Then my green squad of hormigans, I spent 2 CP on bounding advance, which means they got to auto run 6 and could advance and charge. So they're super speedy, and this will be a full squad swing in, and I'm very excited about it. Then the gargoyles basically moved up to take the spot. Now, I don't believe you can sit on 2 objectives at the same time. Otherwise, I would have had the gargoyles sit on the 2 that are there. So they're just on the 1 in the back, because I think that's all they can do. My Hive Tyrant, however, snuck around and out to look at his land raider and hopefully shoot it to death. And then my white squad of gargoyles, I used 1 CP for Encircle the Prey. Basically lets me pick a burrow or fly unit and basically set it up as reinforcements in my next movement phase. So yeah, that was a thing. And then my Pyrovores ran, and they rolled up 4, allowing them to move 9 inches, and so they ran forward because their guns are assault as well. And my blue Hormigan squad rolled a 5 on their run roll, and so that was a 15-inch move, and they were able to get nice and cozy up the board. Now they're quite agile, the little Hormigans, but we'll see how useful that actually is for them. And that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for my psychic phase, because I'm pretty sure the Hive Tyrant can only do 2 powers at a time, or in turn. He used Paroxysm on the Devastator Centurions, or tried to. I rolled a 6, I needed a 7, so it did not go off, which is unfortunate. However, I probably should have re-rolled it now that I think about it. But anyway, then he smote the Land Raider, doing 3 mortal wounds to it. And that was it for the psychic phase. Alright, you guys, so for the shooting phase, I had just a little bit go on. Well, some stuff happened. So the Pyrovores, I started with them. They used their 2d6 because they weren't quite both in 12-inch range. And so 3 wounds went through because I rolled, it was like 15 or 16 shots. And then, I'm pretty sure I rolled really badly. Oh no, you rolled a lot of saves, that's what it was, because it was only -1. So 3 wounds went through, but he has the Helix Gauntlet, so 2 wounds went through, so I killed one of his infiltrators, and that was it. And then, and so that was their shots. Then I moved over to the gargoyles, the yellow gargoyles on the left, shooting at his Land Raider, and it did nothing. They did nothing.
Yes. Yep.
And then the Tyrannofex did it similarly, because he's sitting in terrain, and my Tyrannofex is capped and my gargoyles ran. They were shooting and hitting on 5s, and then being a Land Raider, they needed 5s to wound it. So on rounds of 5s and 5s, also with super low AP, he saved all of them. I don't remember how many went through, but it wasn't very. Oh, it was almost none actually, because I rolled pretty bad on the wound rolls. Hit rolls went pretty well. They went better than I was expecting, but the wound rolls were garbage. So. And then that takes us to the heavy duty shooting, which was the Exocrine. It shot at his Land Raider, not the one with Pedro in it, I believe. And 4 wounds went through, doing a total of 12 damage to his Land Raider. And then I shot again at it with the Hive Tyrant. Now only 1 wound went through, but it was AP 5, so with cover, he was able to have a 6-up, but he failed it, and the Land Raider died. It did not explode. And then, yeah, that was the shooting phase. I think 1 or 2 Terminators died, or...
Well, 2 would have. I used a reroll to try to save 1, and so 1 Terminator died, and they're out. 7 Terminators are out on the field. Yeah, and that's the shooting phase.
Alright, you guys, so for the charge phase, my red squad of Hormigons charged his Land Raider, but they failed. I don't remember what they rolled. It was like a 3. It was pathetic. And I didn't want to re-roll it because my green squad needed about a 4, so I didn't want to risk it. So I just left them. Then the green squad charged. They actually got in on like a 9 or an 11 or something annoying. And then he overwatched.
Yeah,
so
and
take it here.
Yeah. So initially, I know there's a Imperial Fist stratagem, so basically they have exploding 6s, but there's a stratagem that allows me to have a further exploding 6. However, I didn't know that the stratagem only applied to core and character, so we looked over. And so basically what you see on the screen is me doing it under the assumption that I could do double exploding 6s with them. I couldn't. So like after like the entire squad is removed from the board, we actually go redo it, because I remember how many I hit. I hit 23 6s to hit. And so we basically redid the hits and wounds and stuff, and by the end of it, after they fired, only 8 of them survived, because when I rolled my 30 heavy bolter shots, tons hit, 10 hit, and only 2 wounded because I rolled 8 1s, which is exactly what I needed there to wipe them out. And then my heavy grav gun killed 1 guy. And yeah, so in the end, they did survive, but only 8 of them survived. But a lot less of them would have survived if it wasn't for that stupid... Well, so a mistake that we rectified, but yeah, Overwatch was absolutely devastating for these Hormigons, and that was the charge phase.
So for the fight phase, Hormigan swung, 6 went through, and then I think, or 6 went through to wound, only 2 actually failed, so 2 wounds went through onto one of his Centurions, and then he swung back and he killed 6 out of the 7, because the Devastator Centurions don't actually have a power fist or anything. They just have their normal, slightly larger hands. And so 1 Hormigan survived. And yeah, that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so for secondaries, I have none. So yeah. I got close on engaging all fronts. Synaptic Insight, I got close. I got to 4 for one of his Terminators dying. and for killing the Land Raider, but I needed 5 points to actually get points out of that. Alright, so that was unfortunate. But, so one of the, anyway, yeah. So I got 0 points.
Alright, so for the movement phase, because Space Marine troops make objectives sticky, I had my infiltrators abandon that objective. I still got it. And so I completed my action there, on my home objective, and there, so I'm going to get a bunch of points. Now, as far as the one where the Hormigaunt charged my Devastator, so we looked at the rules, and basically, I do not, me completing the action is not stopped because all I did was get charged, and I didn't do anything to break it according to the rules. And I looked at the mission for the secondary for the Imperial Fists, and it says that there's no conditions for failure that's unique to it. So going by the book, my guys were able to complete the objective there. So they have they succeeded the action there, even though they're in combat with that one Hormigaunt, which we also mentioned they did go through a morale phase, but my opponent spent 2 CP to forcibly keep them there, so I would lose an entire round of shooting. So, yeah, it's a smart thing to do, so, oh well. And then, as far as that goes, Primaris Second Marine tried to make a beeline for the last Land Raider Crusader. Primaris Lieutenant moved closer to the Terminator with Power Fist. The Terminators moved up. They're not in the Biomatter Reclamation Pool. They moved close enough to be there, but they can do some stuff. And, yeah, the Primaris Apothecary moved within range of the Green Terminators. The Red Infiltrators, since the objectives were sticky, they could leave it. They moved out to try to create a bigger field of no deep striking, which should hopefully help. And my Terminators got out of the Land Raider with Pedro, and then they moved straight up, and hopefully we'll be able to do something good. And that is my movement phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, I had the Land Raider start off, so I had him split fire. He fired his Hurricane Bolters into the Gargoyles, and everything else into the Tyrannofex. So he fired his Hurricane Bolters, 24 shots at that range, wiped them out entirely. I'm in Tactical Doctrine, by the way. And then Multi-Melta fired, one missed. I spent a CP to reroll it. Missed again, and then failed to wound. Twin-Linked Assault Cannon fired, did 2 wounds to him in the end. 4 total, but he saved 2. And then after that, my Terminators all mag dumped the Hormigaunts in front of them. Did a boatload of wounds, killed a bunch of them. Got to reroll once because being next to Pedro Cantor. And the heavy weapon guy fired his crack weapons at the Tyrannofex, and both hit, both wound, and then he both saved them. That was disappointing. Then Pedro fired his guns at the Hormigaunts and killed 4. All hit, all wounded, and AP -2 because of tactical. After that, the Terminators, who I was able to bring back 1 because of that Primaris Apothecary, then began to fire into the Hive Tyrant. So I spent 1 CP for Fury of the First, which I can do in the shooting and assault phase, where my Terminators can get +1 to hit. And they negated the cover that he was in, and so the bolt guns did 2 wounds to him, and then the heavy weapons fired. One was able to do a wound, he failed it, and he spent his last CP to re-roll the save, and he made it. But Hive Tyrant's down to 9 wounds, it seems. And that is the end of my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, Pedro and his Terminators next to him charge the Hormigaunts in front, and that's pretty much it. Alright, so for the fight phase, essentially what happened was Pedro Cantor swung, and then he got terrible tons of 2s, because his Power Fist isn't like anything special, it's just a Power Fist, so he has -1 to hit. So he killed 1. The Terminators, however, had a different story, because they charged in, so I had 6 guys, I didn't include the Sergeant because he has a Power Sword, so I have 6 guys, so they have 12 attacks normally, but they charged, that's 18, and because Pedro gives them +1, they had 24 attacks on their charge, and they wiped out the squad. I used Fury of the First to give them +1 to hit, so they were hitting on 3s, and they would reroll 1s being next to Pedro, and they rolled a bunch of 2s, but they still wiped out the squad. And then he, with his Hormigaunt, swung on my Devastator Centurions, but they did heal in the movement phase because they were within 3 inches of the Apothecary, the squad at the end of the movement phase. So he did 1 wound to them because these guys can't roll saves to save their lives. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for points, also I will mention that at the end, like, I forgot my Centurion swung back. They just killed the Hormigaunt easy, and then they just moved towards the Hive Tyrant, which I think was closer to one of them. So for points, Bolster Barricades, I did manage to get it. 1 in my home and 2 in the No Man's Land gives me 9 points. Grind them down, I wiped out 2 of his squads this turn, so I have 2 there. Shock Tactics, I took an objective that he controlled at the start of the turn on the top left. And so I had a huge swing of points in my direction. And I got Tide of Conviction because I controlled one of his territory ones at the end of my turn. Yes, but we'll see what he does on his counter push. So, yeah.
Alright, you guys, so for my movement phase, a couple of things have happened. First off, my Tyrannofex stayed basically where he was at. He just kind of repositioned just a hair, but that was really it. Then moving over to my Pyrovores, they ran, I rolled a 5, so they moved a whole 10 inches, so they are now sitting on this back objective here. And then my, let's see, who moved next? It's kind of all over the place. Then my blue Hormigants moved forward because I didn't have the 2 points to give them the auto run and then run and charge, so they just kind of moved to the closest Terminator. And so, let's see how that goes. And then my, let me think here. Then I had some deep strikes the reserves come in, so my Death Leaper, my Trigon, and my Gargoyles. My Gargoyles came in and they started doing the objective. My secondary Spore Nodes. And then the Death Leap and the other guy are just there. But they came in, even though he's using the scout models, they're actually apparently infiltrators. Yeah, so they had to be 12 inches away. And then my Hive Tyrant kind of just moved forward into the middle. He didn't run either. But he just moved forward. Then my purple Gargoyles moved on to the objective he was sitting on, and my Exocrine moved on to my back objective that the Gargoyles were sitting on. And so, yeah, that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for the Psychic phase, the Hive Tyrant again tried to do Paroxysm on a 7, and he failed with, again, a 6. So I tried to re-roll it. And I rolled even worse. I rolled a 3, so that was super depressing. Anyway, then I tried to smite them, and I rolled a 10, and then I rolled a 1, so I did 1 more wound. So really depressing, waste of a turn, but here we are. So that was the Psychic phase. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, I started with my... What did I start with? My Pyrovores, I believe. The shooting at his Terminators with their 2d6 shots. The Pyro Gout. I think 1 wound went through. I believe 1 wound went through.
Oh yeah, and then I ignored it.
Yeah. I don't know who this guy is. Anyway, alright, so yeah, so 1 went through. Then I went over to my Trigon, and he shot at the Infiltrators. He also did a wound, but then the Helix Gauntlet ignored it.
He's the one who ignored it. The Green Squad feel no pain from the Apothecary, so it was 2 damage.
That's how it happened, yeah. Okay, and then I went down to my Tyrannofex shooting at the Terminators. He was able to kill one, which was the heavy weapons guy. Not super sure why. Maybe to keep the, hopefully, Terminators out of combat. I don't know. But so with all 38 shots, he killed 1 guy. So that was a win. And then I went to my Exocrine shooting at his Land Raider. And so he did 1 wound slip through. And then the Hive Tyrant as well shot at him with 1 wound slipping through as well. and it was a total of 8 damage on the Land Raider, so it's at half life. And that was the shooting phase. With you guys, so I started off with my blue squad of Hormigans charging as Terminators. Because they were out of line of sight, there's only one guy that could overwatch, so he decided not to do that, which makes sense. But they got in, they needed a 6, they got a 7. Then I tried to charge with my Tyranids into his Terminators. I wasn't really sure if it was a good idea, but I was like, well, you know, what the heck, why not? Might as well give it a go. But he failed on a 3, he needed a 4, so what a fatty. And then I kind of swung for the hills because the Trigon and the Death Leper needed a 12. Because the Infiltrators, so I was like, might as well. It doesn't do any hurt to not. But they both failed, unsurprisingly. And then my Hive Tyrant charged the Devastator Centurions. And he actually, well, he got in. He needed like a 5 or something.
Yeah.
And he got in. And he overwatched, but because the Hive Tyrant is toughness 8, it really did a number on his shots. So only 1 wound went through on the Hive Tyrant from the overwatch. He had like, I don't know, like 150, 160 shots total. 30 something heavy bolters, the grav gun, hurricane bolter, you know, so anyway. But so only 1 went through because of his toughness 8. And technically the Overwatch, because he needs 6s, so it was 6s and 6s for the most part. And that was the charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase, I started with my Hive Tyrant because he spent 1 point on Overwatch, so he couldn't interrupt, so it didn't really matter where I swung. So the Hive Tyrant swung and he killed 2 Devastator Centurions. And then my Hormigan swung and they actually killed 4 of his Terminators. So that was actually pretty cool. It was also fun to roll 87 dice. But yeah, so he killed, because he had to roll like 45 saves, and he actually saved a lot of them. 11 went through, so he saved, what, that 34 or something, 33, which is kind of ridiculous, but it was a 3-up, so. So anyway, so he lost 4 Terminators, and then my Hormigans consolidated into the Devastator Centurions. They swung back on my Hormigans, killing 5, and then one of them swung on my Hive Tyrant, and I believe he missed entirely. Or maybe he failed the wounds, I'm not sure.
No, I failed to hit. Yeah.
Oh, he failed to hit. Oh no, that's terrible. And that was the fight phase.
Alright, so for the morale phase, my Terminators rolled, they failed, then they make it back at on the re-roll, so that happened.
Alright, you guys, so for points, this was actually a pretty good turn for me. I had 2 primaries, I had 3 primaries, so 2 points for primaries. I had 2 points in Tide of Conviction because I control an objective in his deployments or territory. And then Synoptic Insight because I got 6 of my kill points by killing so many 3 wound or higher models. And then I got 4 points for my Spore Node Secondary because of my my guys' gargoyles. And then I got the full 3 points for Engage on all fronts because I engaged on all of the fronts. So, yep, a pretty good turn for secondaries. We will see what happens in this next turn, however.
Alright, so for the movement phase, Pedro gave Chapter Master re-rolls to his Blue Terminator squad. Centurions fell back. Terminators moved forward. Primaris Lieutenant moved forward. Land Raider Crusader moved. You can only move 3 inches in there because of his debilitated movement. The Primaris Tech Marine moved up close to him. My Red Infiltrators moved further back away from the Trigon. The Green Infiltrators moved away from all that threats. And 1 Terminator will come back. Yes. Because of the Apothecary's healing. And that was the end of my turn. Alright, so for the shooting phase, the Land Raider Crusader fired at the the Hive Tyrant. So he was going to fire his assault cannon and the multi-melta at him, and the rest into the Termagant squad. So he fired his multi-melta, one missed, and the last one didn't wound. I think. Oh no, he saved it. No, it went through. He saved it, and then he failed it, and then he re-rolled his last CP to save it, and it saved. Then he fired. My Land Raider Crusader fired the twin-linked assault cannon, did 2 wounds to him, bringing him down to 5. Then my bringing him down to 7. Then my Primaris Tech Marine fired at him with his grav pistol and assault bolter, and the assault bolter actually got a wound through. He failed it, and that was 2 damage, so brought him down to 5. And then my Primaris Lieutenant fired his grav pistol, or Neo-Volkite pistol, which does mortal wounds on 6s to wound, did nothing against him. Then my entire squad of green Terminators fired at the Hormorgons. I forgot about his heavy weapon. I bring that back later because I would always split fire it into the Tyrant. My opponent allowed that, but for now, I fired all the Storm Bolters into the Hormorgons, killed a bunch, can't recall the number. I had the Infiltrators fire at the Hormorgons. They actually fired first, 6 shots because 2 were in rapid fire range. Shot a lot, killed a lot, did pretty well. After that, then up top, Pedro Contour fired at the Tyrannofex, did nothing. Then the Terminators with Power Fists fired at the Tyrannofex and did like 2 wounds or something. And then I finally finished off with the Terminator with heavy weapon and the green squad. My opponent let me do it. Fired his 2 crack at the whatever the thing is, Hive Tyrant. They both hit, they both wounded, and he failed both. And I rolled exactly the amount of wounds he had, and the Hive Tyrant died. That was a huge surprise. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so for charges, my Primaris Lieutenant charged the Hormigons, gets in. Then my Terminators charge, they get in against the Hormigons. Then my Terminators up top left charge the Tyrannofex, and so does Pedro. And that is the end of the charge phase. Alright, for the fight phase, I start off with not Pedro, but the Terminators. They swing and they just completely, absolutely slaughter the Tyrannofex. Punch it into paste. And then they consolidate towards the Exocrine, and Pedro doesn't do anything. Then the Primaris Lieutenant charges in. 5 attacks. 1 wound. Kills 1. Then, with needing 3s to wound, by the way, yeah, 1 missed. Everything else didn't wound except for 1. Then the Terminators swung and slaughtered everything but 2, but then the Sergeant went with his power sword, finished off the squad. They consolidated towards the nearest enemy, which was the Gargoyles. And that is the fight phase. Alright then, so I controlled 2, controlled 3, and Tide of Conviction, I hold one of my opponent's territory. And then I set up Bolter Barricade, grind them down. I got him from the last turn successfully. I had killed 3 units this turn. Shock Tactics I didn't get, but I realized he wasn't... Oh wait, hold on. Oh wait, it is 4 points. It's the new one. Forgot. Never mind. And yeah, that is it for points. A lot of swings back and forth. It's hard to tell where this is going.
Alright, you guys, so for the movement phase, essentially what I'm gonna do is this, or what I did was this. Actually, I don't even know where I started. My Trigon, I moved him 10 inches closer towards everything that's happening. Same with my Death Leaper and my Gargoyles, and then my Gargoyles started the Spore Mines, secondary. Then my Pyrovores ran, so that way they're just in range and able to see his Terminators or his Infiltrators, either really. And then my Exocrine, so I could have kept him in that table quarter or moved him farther in to do engage on all fronts, but I thought it was better to just take some time and shoot at the Terminators running around Cantor to try and kill them off. And also keep him from getting shot as well. And so that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for the shooting phase, a whole lot of nothing happened, but essentially, the Exocrine shot at the Terminators, killing off 2 of them, because every wound that goes through is a dead Terminator. Then my Pyrovore shot at his other Terminators, and they were in range for their 2 damage version. But on the D6 rolls, I rolled a 2 and a 1. So 2 went through, I think, and then he saved 1. And so 1 guy just took 2 damage, which was super unfortunate. Then the Trigon shot at his infiltrators and also failed at life, and nothing happened there. So that was the shooting phase. Lots of sadness. All right, you guys. So charges. My Death Leaper charged his infiltrators, and he got in, rolling an 11, which was super high. He only needed like a 7 or something, but anyway, so he got in, and then my Trigon charged his Primaris Tech Marine and his Land Raider Crusader, and he got in there as well with an 8, and that was my charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase, the Trigon swung exclusively on the Tech Marine, smushing him, and then it left the Land Raider alone. But then the Death Leaper swung on the squad, 5 wounds went through, and then what happened there?
The Death Leaper?
One was the Hex Gauntlet, taken down to 4. Yeah, no, that's not right.
5 wounds went through.
And either way, 3 died, and the sergeant lived.
Yeah, 5 wounds. I can say it. 5 wounds went through. 1 was saved. It left 4. The Helix Gauntlet ignored 1, so 3 wounds went through. So 3 died, and I had 1 guy left.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So, and that was the fight phase.
Yeah. The guy who survived swung back and did a wound, and the Land Raider, when he swung back, did nothing, and that was the fight phase. Alright, so due to time constraints and stuff, we decided to call it and Theory Hammer the rest. And so it literally came down to, like chess piece movements, we did a little bit of Theory Hammer on dice. It came down to if anyone would kill one more unit than the other at the end for grinding down. And that's pretty much it. And so we decided to make it a draw because his secondaries really would pull him ahead, and it would straight up come down to how well he would be able to handle the back line and just some stuff like that. So we're going to call it a draw because it could go either way. We couldn't really tell by that point, but it was incredibly close with massive swings back and forth. Sorry for that time constraint thing. It's just things happen. And yeah. Alright, so MVP, LVP. For Crimson Fist, LVP is Primaris Lieutenant, who only got to use his aura buff twice, in which case he made 1 reroll, and when he finally got into melee combat, he killed 1 grunt, or 1 gaunt. So, worst performance. MVP is quite a tight race. The Land Raiders, who were solid blocks, who did tons of damage early on, delivered their payloads very quickly, slaughtering things left and right, or the Centurions, who just absolutely devastated entire Gaunt squads, obliterated in the Theory Hammer, his backline, or his, whatever the Turbogon thingy is. Then there's the Apothecary, who kept supporting and bringing back Terminators, very key units, brought back a Devastator in our Theory Hammer and stuff. And then Terminators, of course, who weathered tons of fire, killed tons of Gaunts, killed big guys and stuff. But in the end, I'm going to have to give it to MVP Primaris Apothecary because this game went exactly how I said at the beginning. I'm going to be in the center rotating a lot, and I'm going to be using a lot of buffs, and I'm going to be very carefully playing with the very few guys I have to make the most out of them. And him bringing back a bunch of Terminators and guys that were in key positions allowed me to have a lot of key units at the right place at the right time to do the best damage. And so, the spirit of thinking that I won, I think my Primaris Apothecary is the most important unit, MVP. So MVP, MIP, most important unit, or whatever. Yeah, so that is my choices. What do you got?
Well, I actually really like the army as a whole. And so there wasn't anything that was like super down and out, except, well, so. Alright, so MVP I think was the Hype Tyrant. I think it was pretty close. Him and the Exocrine, actually. They just sat in the back for a little bit and they just really chunked out damage. I think the Exocrine actually ended up doing more damage than the Hype Tyrant.
Yeah.
But the Hype Tyrant having a flat 5 damage gun is just that's kind of crazy.
It only came into play once.
Yeah. But so I think the Hype Tyrant would be MVP. because he also is able to do melee and do a bunch of buffs and stuff, but also he just did a lot of damage. Exocrine would be a close second, just because it was able to sit in the back and just chunk away constant damage, because it had so many shots, the D6 plus 3, or D3 plus 6, I should say. Now, LVPs, I think a lot of stuff, so the Pyrovores, I think, are a close second. They actually honestly didn't do very much, however, they were able to sit on an objective, so that's kind of important, and they're slightly tough. And they're not super threatening, so they're just kind of ignored. So, but of course, they're not super threatening. The question is, are they worth taking in points? And I'm not sure. They're really cheap on points, so that's kind of why I grabbed them. I was like, I have some spare points. But their flamers do have a lot of potential. I just rolled garbage for how many there were. And then their rolls in general. So they're close, but I think the number one LVP one that looks really cool, but probably not super worth it, is the Tyranids. That Assault 30 looks really, really cool, and it would probably be great against Orcs or Guard, or maybe other Tyranids or Towers, I don't know. Something, but he just did not do a whole bunch over here. Now, to be fair, he also got whittled down by multi-meltas and stuff like that pretty early on, so it also handicapped his shooting a good bit, but then he also went up against tougher targets, so he doesn't have a higher damage gun, so
Yeah.
probably partially how I played him or what he was just paired up against. He did end up surviving, though, for a couple of turns. So again, I don't think there's anything I disliked in this army, but LVP is the Tyranids because he did very little.
All right, so overall for the game, as far as the Crimson Fist goes, they're pretty interesting. The Overwatch was probably the most interesting thing. The Exploding Sixes really came into play, especially against those Gaunts. 23 hits with 23 sixes, because they were at, like, right in front of me. Exploded heavily, although we had to redo that, but, like, Terminators also, the firepower I was dealing with was very good, and even with the Crusader and stuff and all their guns, did really, really good. I was very surprised. And the fact is, because there's also another factor. Because I'm able to stay in Tactical Doctrine longer, I was able to deal a lot of damage second turn, third turn stuff with AP -1 bolters, like, for a long time. That was a big deal. I was chipping off a lot of damage here and there. Any changes would be just me getting used to. I thought Centurions had power fists. I straight up did. Deceptive model. And so if I
giant hands.
Yeah. I would have played it differently so that they never would have gotten interrupted. I would have kept them as far backline as possible. But then again, I had no idea you could basically sprint across the entire map in one go. You had Eldar speed in this game. So I was
feeling better. I didn't actually know either.
Yeah, so I was caught a bit flat-footed there, but if I would have known better, I probably would have had... I'd probably changed a few things. I would have probably had the Devastators behind someone else to do things. But overall, the Crimson Fist are very interesting in their specialization. They're anti-horde, which I forgot for the first half of the game. I gotta look up what their thing really says, if it would help in Overwatch or something. And yeah, so what do you think of these Tyranids?
I actually really enjoyed them. I kind of wish that I had taken more just horde units and had like cheaper HQs and just tried an overwhelm thing, because when they did get into combat, they did a fair amount of damage, I thought. But I think pairing them with heavier shooting was probably a good idea. So I actually enjoyed the Tyranids. I think some of the things, so like the Trigon and the Death Leaper, I think they were good, but I didn't realize they were infiltrators, and so that 12-inch thing, because the Death Leaper, when he comes in, can reroll charge rolls, and so them coming in and just being able to kind of do a little bit more earlier on would have been good, which they could have done, but anyway. But I actually like the Tyranids. The Gargoyles, even like being able to fly them around and just sit them on objectives because they're so cheap. And you know, the 30 squads of Hormigans. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but I enjoyed it. I can see how you could do hordes with this army. or even just more elite, just like monster units or monster whatever. So especially now with Arks of Omen, just take a bunch of squads of like Carnifexes or something, because they can be the compulsory unit now, and so just have like a giant monster list or something. Like I think Tyranids are actually super flexible, and they have a lot of interesting choices. I think the relics are pretty cool too. Like that damage 5 gun is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought they were really cool. I actually really enjoyed the Tyranids. I would definitely want to play them again, because there is so much that they have in their thing, in their army.
It's enough that you can build a list off what you think looks cool, essentially. And it can work. And also, I just recently read the Crimson Fist Doctrine. It has incredibly ambiguous wording in that when an attack is resolved, so that would have applied to Overwatch. So against your hordes, I would have had 5s on Overwatch, +1 to hit. And it's also melee, so basically any attack I resolve against you, if you have 5 more models than I do, I get +1 to hit. Just blanket. So
I knew for melee for sure. I didn't think it applied to Overwatch though.
Well, the wording was. Yeah, the wording is actually just all-encompassing.
An 8th edition book.
Yeah, any attack. So that probably would have been a bigger deal. But that's situational. I mean, hordes are kind of out of style currently, the way the games are. So not many people would really find that advantage. It's more like it's unlikely. A squad of 6 Devastators.
I think there's only a couple armies that can pull off the horde like fully. I think Tyranids would be one of them. I think it's the classic armies: Tyranids, Orcs.
Yeah, so it's unlikely to work or to happen. But like my Crusader was charged.
Where if you had kind of like how I did, where you had like a lot of pressure up front from the hordes, and then a bunch of stuff like popping up around the sides or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
I think if you can make it really hectic, I think it could work.
Yeah, but like today, commonly squads are in 5 or 10 man units. So like, what are the odds that you're ever going to get
because
this
of like
opportunity?
blast weapons and stuff.
Well, also that's how units are built now, in squads of 5 or 10. That's like throughout the entire game. So more than that is actually very rare. So like, a Land Raider Crusader could get +1 hit on Overwatch against if a squad of 10 charged him for some reason. These Devastators would not be able to do it unless there was a 10-man squad or more, depending on how you want to run them and stuff like that. So it would it's very powerful, but it would almost never come into play realistically, unless your opponent is specifically horde armor. +1 to hit.
Yeah.
It just would never happen.
Yeah, well, that's the fluff, because their whole thing was the whole chapter almost got wiped out by orcs, so they have that anti-horde kind of.
Yeah. So,
but
well,
yeah, like you're saying, there's only like 2 or 3 armies that could even pull off horde.
Yeah.
And then most people don't even use it like that. So.
Yeah. So it's OP, but like once in a blue moon when the planets align. Yeah. So overall, overall the game, things were dying left and right. Huge swings. Hive Tyrant dying was a big swing. Like swings back and forth. So it was really hard to say who would win in the end and stuff like that. But time constraints and all that. So anyway, GG's. We'll see what happens next week. This was actually pretty fun. I did enjoy the Crimson Fist. They're another interesting flavor. If you want Pedro, but I do think that Torgadon would be better for Devastators. Just because he does buff them directly.
Oh, the Signum array?
Yeah. All hit on 2s. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright then. Adios and adios.